Digital 410 proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Henry Sledge.
What is going on? Welcome to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. I still cannot get used to this new theme song, but that's what happens. I think we may have to bring Jeff up to speed on that. He wasn't here around for that, but before we get to that, I just want to welcome everybody to the show. I want to welcome our friend, Mr. Henry Sledge. And Jeff Copsetta is back again. And for those of you joining us live on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch and everywhere else, you're like, who's that gentleman in the bottom right-hand corner? Well, for those of you who've been around with the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast for a long time, you know who this is. He's a return guest, Mr. Gallen Wagner. Gallen, how you doing tonight, sir?
Good, man. Good. How are y'all?
Oh, we're doing fantastic. Now, before we get to the main reason we have you on, we got to give you credit to where credit is due because of you. You have finalized the staff here at the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. You have brought us to what we are today because of you. One Mr. Henry Sledge is sitting here. And I got to tell you, as a World War II enthusiast and a PTO enthusiast and a fan of the show, I think Jeff can agree with me where the morning we woke up, we got this random email from you saying, hey, Eugene Sledge's son wants to come on your show. I was like, Jeff, guess what? Jeff, guess what? You'll never believe this. So thank you so much. Let's bring our fans up to speed. How did Henry reach out to you and you reach out to us? And how did you help complete the show lineup to what it is today?
He didn't. I think, Henry, if I remember right, you posted something in one of the World War II Facebook groups about thinking about doing a podcast and, wondering if there was enough audience to do a podcast. And I saw that and I just shot you a message and said, hey, if you're interested, I know a pretty cool dude that hosts a podcast that would love to have you on, do a couple of shows if you like it. And then if you hate it, you don't ever have to do it again. And if you love it, then you can continue to do it. And I mean, that's basically it. Just
that's spot on. I mean, Galen's right on it. That I had put that out there, and the cool thing about it, Galen, is I love. Well, yeah, I mean, so Don had me on not once but twice, and Don and Jeff had me on, and then Jeff said something. We were talking a couple weeks later, and he had mentioned that there was. You guys are supposed to, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, you're supposed to have a B-24 gunner on, but Don couldn't make the show, and then the guy, he was like literally at the end of his life, of course, right. And you got the word he couldn't be on, but you and I were just talking on the phone about models, and you said, yeah, man, Don was going to be busy, couldn't be on, and that guy, you only get so many chances with a World War II, a living World War II vet or something. And
right, yeah.
And I just said, hey, man, if you ever need somebody to pinch hit, I could carry on a conversation with a B-24 gunner. And then Jeff just said, well, how would you like to I think I'm remembering this right. If I'm wrong, tell me. And it was really Galen put me in touch with you guys, but it was kind of Jeff's idea.
Yeah.
And, and then I said, well, Don's, you got to make sure it's okay with him. And so
Jeff reached out to me and he said, hey, instead of Henry launching his own podcast and building an audience, how do you feel about him coming on the show? I said, well, it's funny you say that because I was thinking the same thing since the last episode. We just hadn't talked.
Yeah.
So Jeff and I basically formulated the same plan without being in communication with each other. And so when he brought it up to me, I was like, well, yeah, it's a no-brainer. So we reached out to you and said, hey, instead of investing in equipment and, if you want to do your own show, I'd be happy to help get you up and running and show you how to do it if you want to join our show. And then our chemistry was so great, and here we are.
Yeah, I couldn't be happier with the way it worked out. I mean, honestly.
It's kind of funny because, after Henry was on the first time I listened to it, and I was like, man, that was great. And, then you were on there again, and I listened to it, and I was like, yeah, that's it's really cool. And then all of a sudden, a few weeks later, or I don't know, maybe a month later, I saw the podcast, and it was like, hey, Henry's a permanent part of the crew now. So I was like, yeah, it's pretty cool. Worked out great. I mean, it's like worlds collide, and of course I'm from Mobile, and Eugene Sledge was from Mobile, and of course Sid Phillips was from Mobile, so It's funny how we know a lot of the same people, but have never really, met before. I just answered a post and said, "Hey, if you're interested, let me know." I knew Don would love to have you on, and so it was kind of like help Don out, but help you out at the same time.
Oh yeah,
Galen, how
100%.
many years did you serve in the Corps?
I did just shy of 10 years, June of 1990 to November of 1999.
So would that be considered career, or how many years do you have to put in to be quote unquote career?
Well, quote unquote retirement is 20 years, but in the Marine Corps, it's really 30 years. So from 20 to 30, you're kind of like on inactive reserve. And so you retire at 20, but until you're 30, you hit 30 years, your commitment is not really up. You can be called back, and before Desert Storm, some guys were called back. We had a guy I was in 6th Marine Regiment's anti-tank platoon, and we had it was that we were in headquarters company, and they called back a master gunnery sergeant that had a lot of nuclear, biological, and chemical experience. That I think he had been retired. He retired at like 25, and he was like 3 years into it, and they called him back for that. So,
Well, the reason I ask is because I know once a Marine, always a Marine, but then I know there's some people who are Gallen Wagner, USMC retired, and some people don't have retired. So it's like, how do you address somebody? And so that's the reason why I asked what the official
20
term
years
before you get the retirement appended to the end of the name.
I got an honorable discharge after 9 years and 9 months and something, and if you got to get 20 to retire. So if you do 20, you retire, and then you can kind of call yourself retired, and that comes with a whole different kind of thing of shopping at the commissary, going to base hospital. 10 years gets you VA if they'll have you, and so I've got an honorable discharge, not a retirement.
Gotcha. Now, it's kind of funny. We've come full circle in two ways. One, as we just said, you introduced us to Henry. But two, I can't believe it's been 5 years already.
I know, man. It's crazy.
How I got introduced to Gallen is he put on one of my favorite events, actually two events, the 75th anniversary of the landing at Tarawa at Fort Morgan, Alabama. And then what was the following year we did Peleliu. And then the year after that was COVID, I think. I don't know. We lost 2 years because of COVID. And then you stepped down, or did you organize the following year that was more of a finer timeline?
Yeah, that Victory in the Pacific event that we did, where it was kind of like everybody do, anything Pacific theater themed for the end of the war, and we had some Marines and Army and Japanese and Australians and just whatever anybody wanted to do. And then the following year, last year, I guess that Victory in the Pacific would have been 21, and then in March of 2022 we did Wake Island in the Philippines.
Yeah,
that was a pretty good event. It was kind of hard to get guys out for that because of uniform requirements and weapons and all that early stuff.
That's why I couldn't make that one, because I could not get. I have pretty much everything else, but I could not get my hand on a Springfield. All I had was an M1 Garand, and so I couldn't make that. But with all that being said, coming up this November in 2023 is the 80th anniversary of the Tarawa landings.
That's right.
And we're looking forward to that. Now, because of you and the 75th anniversary, you fulfilled my bucket list item of doing an aquatic landing from a landing craft in full gear. Yeah. And that'll always go down as one of my favorite things I've ever done. And it wasn't just, we're going to ride out from the beach, turn around, and come back in. We had a nice 2-mile trek in, and that was a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really amazing. The Regional Military Museum over in Houma brought their LCVP over, and we were kind of expecting two. Mark Koch out of Louisiana, he works offshore a lot, and he put his boat in for some maintenance and ended up having some pretty significant engine problems that didn't get repaired before the event, so he couldn't come. But I think,
well, because of Hurricane Matthew, wasn't it?
What's that now?
Wasn't it because of Hurricane Matthew he couldn't get it out of? There was a hurricane that hit the Panhandle like 3 or 4 weeks before then, and he didn't have time to get it out and get the inspections and get the repairs done because of all the hurricanes.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I think his maybe his fuel injectors were leaking or something, which is obviously a fire hazard. I don't remember exactly what it was, but we made do with the one boat. And it's funny, because we did the dry runs on Thursday, and then the weather Friday was actually, we did them on Wednesday, and the weather Thursday was just horrible. I mean, like almost hurricane, like tropical storm. And then Friday the weather was kind of bad, and Saturday the bay was like a sheet of glass. Couldn't have worked out any better. But we didn't account for the weight when we did the dry run. So when you add 25 guys on that thing,
plus guns and
it goes
gear.
considerably slower,
Well, and I was also lucky to have on my landing craft, which we had on the podcast. We had Clay Bonnyman Evans, the author of Bones of My Grandfather, and you invited him down there because his grandfather, as we all know, posthumously got the Medal of Honor. He died during the landings a few hours later, and you invited him down. And people being in the community, as great as they are, we able to get enough outfits and uniform parts that fit him, and he was able to basically ride and kind of experience that part because he had already been down to the Pacific and saw where the battle was, but now he actually kind of got to walk the mile in shoes, full uniform on the landing craft.
Right.
And I just happened to take a selfie and didn't realize he was standing behind me, and he had 1,000-yard stare. You could just tell he was up in his head thinking about what his grandfather and his grandfather's friends were going through on that day. And now
he was in the zone for sure, and I'm sure most of the listeners know, but some maybe not. And his grandfather was Lieutenant Sandy Bonnyman, and he 2nd Battalion 8th Marines was pinned down on the beach for 48 hours. On day 3, Bonnyman grabbed I think 21 Marines to go with him, total of 22, and assaulted the large Japanese bunker that kind of had 2-8 pinned down on the beach. And there's a video of the whole thing, and of course he was killed on top. And I'm not sure. I think it was all but a small number. I don't remember exactly how many of them actually made it, but it wasn't very many. And but basically that action allowed 2-8 to get off the beach and continue pushing inland. And of course, the other battalions of regiments of 2nd Marine Division were trying to come from the end of the island to kind of meet up and collapse everything. So it was really a big deal. And he was his body was buried on Batio Island, and for years and years and years they didn't do anything. And then Clay got hooked up with History Flight, and they started bringing those guys home, and they're still bringing them home every now. Clay was actually there when they uncovered his grandfather's remains on Tarawa. So that's pretty crazy. That and he, of course, he's written a book about his grandfather and his whole experience. And I think it's Bones of My Grandfather.
Yeah, Bones of My Grandfather.
Bones of My Grandfather is a great book, Henry. If you hadn't read it, I think you would really like it.
Yeah, I need to read it.
Yeah, because not only does he give the background and as much as he could explain of his grandfather's experience, but then he talks about the current state of the island. Well, at the time you wrote the book 4 or 6 years ago, and then his experiences of not only being there when his grandfather's bones were recovered, but kind of the issue the organization who does this work, they kind of go through and all the problems they have, and then kind of the false findings. Oh, we think we may have found them. Nope. And it goes through the whole history of why these Marines were quote unquote lost, because as we just stated, they had to dig these graves up and relocate them, or thought they did, so they could build runways and logistics on the atoll. But sadly, some of the plans got lost, some of the grave markers got lost, and there's like entire sections of plots, multiple men who were buried. The maps of the graves were just gone. No one knew where they were.
Yeah. And then when they did start finding them, things had been built on top of some of them, so they had to. But it's really a crazy story, and the History Flight does that. It would, the defense, it's DPAA, I forget, Defense Personnel something, I think, is the ones who kind of started it, and they just really weren't getting anywhere, and History Flight sort of took over, and man, they're bringing them home pretty regular now. Getting them back is one thing, identifying them is another thing. Mm-hmm. So, they have remains that they still have not identified.
Yeah, because
they can't send them home to be buried until they identify them.
And 80 years ago, we didn't exactly take DNA samples of all our guys who enlisted. So there's no dental records and dog tags, and it's hard to find.
Yeah, shameless plug. And I talked to Clay last week, and he's going to Tarawa, obviously, for the 80th anniversary, but that's later in the month, so he's going to try to make it back to Fort Morgan for the 80th.
And we'll have some more people from the organization come on later on this year when it gets closer. But the reason I want to have you on so early is because an event like this does take some travel for people, does take some timing. And
Right.
We want to make people aware of it, and so they can look at the calendar and they can start organizing and join the Facebook page and start seeing the uniform code and make sure they have all the equipment.
Yep.
And one of the things I've said on this podcast many times the last 5 years, this will be one of the few events you go to where you wake up, you step out of your tent, and do a full 100 and 360 degrees, and with the exception of the bathroom from the Park Service up about 2,000 yards away, you will not see a single car, anything resembling modern day, because there's berms. There's 20-foot berms around this area, and we park on the other side. So it's one of the few events that you can damn near get fully immersed. And it's also the first event I've been to where everybody has on the exact same uniforms, the proper tents, everything's lined up, and you almost feel like you're on a movie set. And it's a great way to spend 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, and Charlie Smith, who I know he was a sergeant, maybe a staff sergeant, went to OCS and just got commissioned a couple of years ago, year and a half maybe ago. He's now a battery commander up at Camp Lejeune for 10th Marines, and he's going to be the company commander. And Corey Schultz, who's a active duty Marine Corps captain, is going to be one of the platoon commanders. Jack Spittler, who was a Marine mortarman, is going to command a platoon, and then my son actually is going to command a platoon, to be the platoon leaders, and they'll have platoon sergeants. So we're going to, my goal would be to try to get, a 100-man company with 3 platoons. We're going to have some heavy stuff, some 1919s, 1917s, trying possibly to get the 37 millimeter gun back from the National World War II Museum. And then we'll have a team of guys run that thing. And the LCVP from Homa has been permanently removed from the water, so there's no chance of it coming back. But we do have an LVT that I would say it's possible, not probable at this point. But, short of the amphibious landing and in significantly increasing the authenticity guidelines with some new information. And, I got to give props to Josh Kerner up in Virginia. Man, that guy, he can find any piece of information that you want him to find. We've got the landing order. We know exactly what they were wearing. Some new products have come out, like, What Price Glory's got the riveted shaped knapsacks now. So we really want to dial in the authenticity standards. And, I always tell people Fort Morgan is not your average, what I call hoot and shoot, that some events are, because we don't do the hit taking thing. So it's basically a tactical battle demonstration. And even though we won't have landing craft, and obviously if we get the LVT, we'll be in good shape. But even if we don't, we're going to start the scenario on the beach, and we're actually this time going to try to center the scenario around Bonnyman's Bunker, because 2-8 supported that assault. And we've got a group of guys led by Phil Brinson that are going to do the, I think, 1st Battalion of the 18th Marines that were the engineers and pioneers. Of course, Bonnyman was in 18th Marines. He was the shore party commander for Red Beach 3, which was 2-8's beach. And, it's just like, and then you take the map of Fort Morgan and the map of the Tarawa Atoll and lay them side by side, and you're like, is that the same island? They're really shaped a lot alike.
Mm-hmm.
And so it couldn't be a more perfect site. And, hopes for a landing craft, some sort, but if we don't get it, I really think that the guys will get an experience like they haven't had at another event if they've never been to this one.
So if you live on the East Coast of the United States and you do a Marine Corps impression, a CB impression, whatever, you really need to put this on your calendar. This needs to be your bucket list. This is like this almost, I don't know. Well, once again, it's one of my favorite events. And are we going to do the messing again this year?
Absolutely, yeah. We'll have a Marine Corps birthday cake cutting ceremony and do a mess night there probably Saturday night, because we'll do the night tactical. Did we do a night tactical at Peleliu?
Yeah, I just showed up. It was cold,
right.
And the guys were out in the woods popping off rounds, and they all came back completely soaking wet. And as sad as I was to miss it, it was a little chilly, and I still was nice and dry, and my clean socks, and everybody else.
Yeah, Fort Morgan
around.
in November can be 50 degrees or it can be 80 degrees. You never know, but we'll definitely do that night tactical on Friday night. We've got a really good group of Japanese reenactors that are going to do the Naval Landing Force, and Hiroki from Japan has already messaged me. He's flying in. I'm hoping Takanori will come as well. We do have a guy coming from France, which is kind of interesting. He's going to be in the United States, and he's planning on coming over from Florida. So really cool. We're gonna we'll have a really good group of Japanese that are super into authenticity and making sure that the thing about Pacific Theater reenacting, or like called living history, is that. So I think sometimes the Japanese guys feel like they're just there to be shot at, and we try to give them an experience, and we try to allow them to educate the spectators and public that come as much on, how the Japanese soldiers fought and lived, and the mentality, and it's not. You remember at Peleliu, the greatest thing that's happened to me at Fort Morgan, I think, besides watching Clay run off of that landing craft onto the beach, was probably Takanori. And Henry and Jeff may not know this, but they came from Japan. He was a Japanese Defense Force Airborne Battalion Commander and Ranger School instructor. But they came in, and I grabbed them and brought them down to the fort, and then we went over to the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, and I really got to kind of spend some time with them. And turns out I was a pitcher in high school, and Takanori was a catcher in high school, and we're about the same age. So there's a video somewhere, me and him throwing a baseball back and forth. I'm in my Marine uniform, and he's in his uniform, IJA uniform, like his grandfather wore, and we're just tossing the baseball back and forth.
My favorite moment.
That was pretty cool.
My favorite moment is when you strap the flamethrowers on them. We had flamethrower demonstrations.
Oh yeah. When we strapped it on Hiroki, and I tell you, those guys, that's really cool that that they'll fly all the way from Tokyo to come to these events. They came to Peleliu, and because they were going to come back the next year, and because of COVID, we didn't have anything, and they've really, Japan's really been kind of hit hard, so they're just now starting to kind of open back up and travel and stuff, so.
And so if you guys are interested in finding out more, head over to facebook.com, and the search engine just type the 80th anniversary of Tarawa, Fort Morgan, Alabama, November 3-5, because it's the 3rd to the 5th, it's all weekend, 2023. And you can join up and get all the pertinent information for uniform codes, dates, requirements, this, that, and the other thing, and see some fantastic photos from 5 years ago, and get all the information you need and keep up to date. And it's definitely an event you all want to attend to. Well, Gallen, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and thanks for coming on and giving us some time. And like I said, later on this year, we'll have you or someone from the organization back to do a little refresher and try to get some more people to attend.
Yeah, maybe we get you and Jeff and Henry over there and do a podcast from the event in November.
It's a possibility. I know Jeff and Henry have something secretive going on that they may not be available, but it's a nice backup plan if they are available. So that's always a possibility. But thank you, sir. I will definitely be there, and I may have bells on. I haven't quite decided. But we'll see, and thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Y'all have a good one.
Good to meet you, Gallen.
Nice to meet you, Henry.
And so we're going to move on. Now, Jeff, you have been away for a while. I know you have a lot to talk about, so let's get caught up, friend.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start because there's so many little segues from Gallen that I love to talk about. But
well, we'll have him on again. I just, I want to get that plug out there. I want to thank him for bringing Henry to our attention, but I didn't want to focus an entire hour and a half show on it. So we'll have him back on, and we need to get caught up because, we missed you, fella.
Yeah, well, I didn't feel that way when you guys talk about things like 12 o'clock high.
Yeah.
And I was like, these guys.
I would have been happier, for the record, I would have been happier if you were here.
Man, trust me.
But we also
be here.
We gotta make it sting when you miss a show. We can't just let you just go off like that. So we gotta make it hurt just a little bit. So,
well, it worked.
So
it worked.
We've done 2 episodes on the Air Corps, and so we're past that now. So you must
look. I was hurting for things because Don's like, "What do we talk about?" I'm like, "I got to come up with something," and I just started Big Week by James Holland. So I'm like, "Here, we got to do that, something so we give the listeners a show."
And by the way, I think you have officially started the first WTSP communal book because you sent me your Wing and a Prayer, and I'm just about done with it. I'm going to mail it down to Henry next, and so we have our first communal book between the 3 of us. Which
good.
Yeah, that's actually the first book I ever read about the air war.
That's a
And I
fantastic
probably
read.
read it. I was still in high school. I was still in high school when I read it, and um, somehow, and I think I was, obviously I was rougher on paperbacks at that age than I am now.
You
And
don't
it was
you
a
don't
thick,
say.
yeah,
I got
yeah.
to tape the
It was
cover
a
back
thick
on.
white paperback, and I want to say before I was done reading it that it just simply because it's so thick,
Yeah,
it's not a very good paperback, because it just came apart.
yeah.
And I don't know. I ended up either getting rid of it or when I moved to Texas when I was 16, I just was like, you know what, I'll get another one. And I think I've had that book come my way 3 different times now. So, like I told you, as I get duplicates or whatever, and I don't have, necessarily a need here at the museum for the library or whatever, you guys are gonna, it's, care of Jeff Copsetta, you know.
Yep. And
So
and I told you all before, I wasn't a big Air Corps, person per se, because I really hadn't dipped my toe in it. This book is so great now. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to step away from PTO and ETO for a while. My next 4 or 5 books are going to be this guy. So
yeah,
I'm looking
think of
forward
that.
to reading it.
for sure. So yeah, had a lot going on. So I'll kind of briefly touch. It's still somewhat related to us, but I did have something that kind of changed, and I'm very proud to announce that I was just very recently. You guys know I sit on the board of directors for our little public library here in town, which, by the way, is really well known for its genealogy department, which really comes in handy with historians, and we do have a lot of World War II things come through for people looking for, guys who served and whatnot. And so I was just recently elected. I was kind of caught off guard, but I was elected the president of the board, and so the next 2 years, that's going to be yet another responsibility. But I'm very humbled. And again, it's kind of there's a lot of World War II connections to it because we had a really successful show a few weeks ago with my buddy Dennis Blocker,
Mm-hmm.
and I met him because going around the old historic square, I was going to the bank and I just saw a little sandwich board sign that said Pacific War Historian this Saturday, a little sign in front of the library. I've never been to a library public program or a authored book talk, whatever you want to call it. But when I saw Pacific War Historian, I was like, I got to go.
Absolutely.
So I did. I listened to his amazing story. Had a great PowerPoint and pictures that went along with it to tell the story about the book Heart of Hell, and we just kind of, hit it off, right? And I don't know, maybe 2-3 months after that, he invited me as his guest to go to the symposium at none other than the National Museum of Pacific War that I ended up working for less than a year later. So
Nice.
he kind of, it was just, guys, it's just this crazy domino effect,
Mm-hmm.
how all these things just have built, and you just kind of see the snowball effect so much through so many things. So, yeah, so that happened. And then, gosh, I've had so many great phone calls with people from all over the country and out of the country. So I guess we'll touch a little bit on, Galen was talking about the 80th of Tarawa, right?
Yep.
So um, have an opportunity to go to Tarawa for the 80th. Clay Evans would be the guide in November. Was just on the phone tonight with the guy that's setting it up, who was also a guest on here, Scott Freund from Liberty Jump Team.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, man, they're still working out details because to go from Fiji to Tarawa, the flights only go every 3 days. And so,
Wow.
yeah, because it's
It's almost like
right?
a NASA trip. You got to hit the window.
You gotta hit the window. And the issue is after that 3 days is up, which we're only gonna have one day where we have like a guided tour. So the next 2 days you're just gonna look at trash that's piled up on that island. It's a shame.
Which is sad.
We go back to Fiji, and then the connecting flight to Guadalcanal is literally 5 minutes after we land. So that's
Wow.
not gonna happen.
Wow.
And then it would be another 3 days waiting to try to get back to. So as we're working through those details right now, something else, for the past few weeks, there was something about the trip that just didn't feel right to me. I don't know. I just can't put my finger on it. And then this past Friday night, I get a phone call, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Now, you guys may know this. I did not know that you could get a phone call through Instagram, like an audio call through
I know
Instagram.
you can call people through Facebook Messenger, and since they own Instagram, it would make
Same thing.
sense. Yeah.
Yes, same thing. So had no idea that was a thing.
What's this weird
And
ringtone?
yeah, well, my phone doesn't make any noise because it would always be making noise. So mine stays completely off. So I actually missed it, and I thought it was an accident because I looked at who it was from, and none other than Akak, Scott Gibson, right?
Really?
And I'm like, that was an accidental thing. That that's a butt dial. Right? So I called him just to kind of see, and he didn't answer. So like, yeah, okay, that's fine, whatever. It was an accident. And then maybe 45 minutes later, he calls me back, so I answer it. He's like, "Hey, brother, what's going on?" I'm like, "Hang on, I'm on the phone with Akak, so I'm kind of freaking out." Of my first reaction. I'm not like Henry, right? I have not, I've not done the hobnobbing quite to the extent that he has. So.
Well, he did big time snafu as a child, so he got an early start.
Exactly. He's groomed. I'm still working. I'm fumbling my way through this racket here. So anyway, we're just kind of talking back and forth, and he mentioned an organization that he does some work for, that they go to Normandy every year, right? And they go a couple different places, and he just kind of was like, man, you should come to Normandy this year. And I'm like, dude,
when?
That'd be cool.
November.
I was like, however, this November, 80th at Tarawa.
One world traveling trip a year, thanks.
God, yeah. So he's like, oh, dude, well, you should do both if you can. And I'm like, well, yeah. So I do have a wife that I'd kind of like to keep. So, but again, it was as I was on the phone and he's talking the details. I said, Scott, man, I'll be honest. Like, there's something about this Tarawa trip that I'm just not sure about. And I said, so tell me more about this thing. And like I said, we're on the phone for like an hour or so. And at the end of it, I thought, man, I think I already kind of made up my mind. Why would I not, go to Normandy for the 79th anniversary this June? It's not during the school year, so it doesn't put me in a bind like November would for 3 weeks out on the other side of the globe right before semester exams. Like, I can only imagine, Anyway, so
well, that, and I think if the 3-day window NASA equation wasn't an issue, I think that decision would have been a lot harder for you to make. But there just seems to be so many potential hurdles in that trip, and a huge likelihood of being stuck or waiting someplace for long extended amounts of time that probably made that decision a hell of a lot easier.
Absolutely. And I've already flown across the Atlantic once. I've got some experience there, yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. And I still have to, and I know for Tarawa or for that Fiji, or actually to even get to Fiji, you've got to have the stick and you've got to have the booster.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I
so I was like, well, there's no decision for me on that now. That's
so you guys might become the Fort Morgan, Alabama.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do. So one of the guys that I invited to come with us to Tarawa, he's a combat medic stationed in Germany right now. He was going to be stateside in September and get back just in time to turn around and fly over with me. I kind of told him this scenario, and he's like, well, dude, if you're not going, I'm not going. And he goes, but yeah, if you come to Normandy, I'll be in Germany till September. He's like, I was in Normandy 2 weeks ago. He's like, I'll take you wherever you want to go. I'll show you around. No big deal. So the next person I contacted was Leighton. And he was just like, dude, when we going? Are you here yet? So we had some great conversations the last couple of days. And I told him, I said, look, I turned 40 on June 3rd.
Oh, that's cute.
It'd be pretty cool to do that at a bomber base in England. Maybe fly there for a day or two and then go with him to Normandy and link up with my buddy there and find a place to stay. And
now you got to make Henry and I a promise.
Y'all could be considered carry-on. You need to come with me. That's not an option.
Well, you'd have to pretend to be a hockey player because those would be some big-ass bags. But no, you have to be – you got to promise us that you will walk through Normandy – in your newly acquired all-leather 42 jump jacket. We have not talked about that on the show yet. Explain to the audience what you have and where you got it, because this is probably one of 3 that in existence, if not one of 1.
Yeah, it's so. If you're familiar with the M42, and I mean it is.
And if you're not, just think of Band of Brothers,
right?
Jump jacket with all the pockets.
Yeah, exactly. With all the pockets. It's got the belt. and it fits me like a glove.
Explain it for
And
the audience who are listening to the audible version, not seeing the video. What?
abs- yeah, absolutely. So it's how it came about was a good friend of mine who, again, we've had as a guest on the podcast, Mr. Brandon Vineyard, whose father ran the most unbelievable and most complete World War II field kitchen in the country. We had lost him. I guess it's been, oh man, maybe a year or so ago now. It's been a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he just kind of contacted me one day and he goes, "Hey man," he said, "me and my brother were gifted custom leather M42 jackets when they were over in Normandy because he used to jump with Liberty Jump Team, and he was there for the 60th in '04. So he got to see a lot of the guys that were still left, and he got his mohawk haircut and all that stuff by these veterans. And um, this was worn by a guy who I think, and I have the complete story and I can share it with you guys, but it was actually a Japanese American soldier who was airborne qualified shortly after the D-Day invasion, ended up eventually in the 442nd, served in Korea, served in Vietnam, as an airborne paratrooper. So as a career soldier, retired out, and I guess for whatever, I think his name was Bob, and I may butcher the last name, maybe Izuki, something close to that. But had this jacket custom made, and Brandon was like, "Hey, do you want it?" And I'm like,
Does it fit?
"Yeah, yeah." So just nice enough to mail it to me just in time for Christmas, and I wear it every day.
Send
It
us
just
a new picture so we can put up on a new, not nude, a new picture so we can post it on the page tomorrow. I know with my speech impediment, you may misinterpret that. I might get some weird photos. So a new photo of you with the jacket on. You can send the other
yeah,
ones
will
to my
do,
email,
man, for sure. Yeah,
we'll post that up.
people talk to me all the time. I get compliments on like, "Oh, that's a really nice jacket." And I'm like, "Well, actually, it's a World War II." Like, okay, yeah, I'm sure it has something to do with history. Okay, we don't know the whole story.
Oh,
You know how the look you get. Like,
well,
okay,
no, it's funny. I forgot all about it until just now. So it got cold here and it was raining one day. And so I had got around Christmas, at the front had their closeout sales, and I got the P44 camo equivalent of the Army HBT jacket, the one that's not reversible. But apparently, the the thread the thread crew would have noticed, I guess, on this particular jacket or running jackets, the thread count was wrong on the right pocket or whatever. And so these things are marked down to like $32 during Christmas. And so I picked one up. I don't care about the thread count. And so I'm wearing it. And plus, I don't like to wear my Marine Corps stuff because it has the EGA on it. And I don't want people to think I served in the Marines when I didn't. And so the Army one doesn't have the EGA. It's the green side out, not reversible. So I'm standing in Lowe's looking for something for my kayak. This guy walks through, goes, "You going hunting?" I was like, "No." And in my mind, I'm saying, "Don't do it. Shut up." But the historian in me said, "Actually, besides, this jacket was pretty much designed to hunt Germans. This was the first camo pattern issued to the Army in 1944, but they didn't really use it because after they deployed it, they realized from a far distance that it looked like the German World War II, camouflage." And I was like, "So, people say there was no U.S. Army camouflage in World War II, but this," and he's like, "Yeah, served in the Army, said his rank and his years and this and that and everything else, but yeah, it's like, don't inadvertently ask a historian about his clothes because you'll get way more than you bargained for. It just comes with it."
absolutely, yeah. Actually, one of my favorite impressions is I have an Army the frog skins from the Pacific, side of things like Alamo Scouts,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just my heritage. First Cav Recon Scouts, got to do that in the Southwest Pacific. So that's one of my Army combat uniforms. It's kind of a favorite for people, especially my son. He's like, "Oh, you got to wear that," I'm like, "I'm not gonna wear that to an air show, son. I have all this awesome Air Corps stuff. I'm not gonna wear Army frog skins to an air show, But and double buckles and everything, which double buckles are. I'm not a big fan of those. They're not very comfortable for me, but yeah, I know what you're talking about for sure. That's a cool pattern. So yeah, gosh, oh my gosh, I have so much. I think I sent you guys a text earlier that like out of the blue last night, um, setting my alarm on my phone, and I get a new follow from Alex Kershaw. I'm like, holy smokes, where did
Nice.
this come from? And I know I've talked about his book before. I've obviously he's written multiple books, but I've only read The Few, which I highly recommend because it's just an unbelievable story. And Henry, I think you're familiar with The Few, correct?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, what seven Americans that had to fight, the whole uh, almost like an espionage thing, really treason, because we were still not at war yet with Germany, and these guys were doing everything they can to not get
Mm-hmm.
executed for leaving the country, linking up with a shady guy on a park bench in Montreal to catch a plane, to catch a train, to catch another plane, to sneak over in a cargo hold just to fly Spitfires or Hurricanes in the Battle of Britain. It was just an unbelievable story about these six or seven, these few
Mm-hmm.
American pilots that saw action in Battle of Britain, and it just blew me away. I don't know what made me pick the book up, but I did, and I'm so glad I did. And then Alex Kershaw, the author, is following. Wow, this is amazing. So hopefully we can, hopefully
And
have him on.
I think 3 or 4 episodes I did quite. I don't know. I did 20, 30 minutes on The Longest Winter. I just finished that book. That was a great book that you had sent me. By the way, we haven't done this in a while. What's up, JT Rocker 99 joining us on the YouTube live stream. He says, "Howdy, guys." So what's going on, fella? Thanks for hanging out. Um, before we get to the rest of your catch up stuff, why don't you let's do a quick mail call. You guys have been blowing us away with the mail call. This is like the third week in a row that we've gotten like just unexpected emails. And so we're going to give Jeff the honors to read this one. We're not going to read the entire thing because it's like 10 paragraphs long. It's a beautiful email, but we're going to get down to the brass tacks. And if you guys want to email us and have us read it on the air, please email us at mailcall@WTSPWorldWar2.com. Or, if it's more up your alley, you can just send it directly to our Facebook or Instagram through a direct message. But you can either email us or DM us. In either way, we will read it to the audience. So go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, this came from Rona Bushbaum, and yeah, I am going to I'm only going to edit out some words here, not because they're not important, only because just for the sake of time, because like Don said, it is a lengthy email. So she writes, "Dear Don, Jeff, and Henry, this letter was started over a month ago on December 7th in Honolulu, to be specific, but the holidays, surgery, life in general prevented its completion. I recently planned on abandoning it altogether until you read Mail Call this week, and Henry pointedly mentioned that you guys really did enjoy hearing from people. So, in that vein, here it is. I stumbled across your podcast this spring via Henry's interview with Angus Wallace, and it's now my favorite World War II based podcast, as your tagline claims. You three make me feel like I'm just sitting around with buddies shooting the shit about World War II. Even when the discussion veers off topic, it's always interesting. We do veer off topic. None of you claim to be an expert, but as Henry once put it, you share a passion for the subject matter just like us listeners. My main passions are everything PTO, Pearl Harbor, logistics, World War II era medicine, graves registration service, mainly a lot of things that speak to the human experience and the terrible cost of war. ETO is fascinating as well, but the PTO for me truly exemplifies ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances doing extraordinary things. There is something so compelling to me about these young boys in far flung specks of sand on the other side of the world in alien landscapes fighting an enemy from a culture so foreign to their own. I perhaps am also morbidly drawn to certain details of Pearl Harbor because of what I do for a living. I'm a burn ICU nurse at a major trauma center and have been for the past 12 years. I think about the massive burn injuries sustained by those men on December 7th and can see them exactly as if I was there, and the trauma nurse in me longs to travel back in time to help them. My heart and gut goes out to them and what they had to endure to heal if they survived at all. If there is one thing worse than getting burned, it's the treatment for burns. And this is especially applied to the 1940s and the treatment modalities of the time. Studying World War II is a solitary endeavor for me, aside from my son, who is a military history freak, but as a 21-year-old, Riley doesn't want to hang out all that much with his mom anymore. There is no one in my circle who enjoys studying or discussing World War II. So, in effect, you three are my World War II community. I'm not a World War II reenactor, but our family did Civil War reenacting for years, and when my kids were teenagers, so I'm familiar with the thread counters and the living history community and enjoy hearing you and Jeff talk about details of the hobby and your various events. So she goes on to talk about some of the things that she got to uh, visit in Honolulu. She's been lucky enough to be at Pearl Harbor for the 80th and 81st anniversary of the attacks. She's been a pro at least a half a dozen times in the past, which is just, it's unbelievable. She said, last year I brought my son and his friend, both history majors. This year it was my husband, who does not have the World War II disease, but accompanies me on these things because he's a good man. I regret severely that we didn't come many years ago when more survivors were alive, but I hadn't yet caught the disease. Boy, I think we all feel that way, don't we?
Truth.
She says, Don, you've indicated that you wanted some more books. You've also mentioned you prefer the personalized accounts from veterans. So she, I guess she is sending you some information and some books about firsthand accounts from survivors from Pearl, Wheeler Army Airfield, Naval Air Station Kaneohe, Iwa, and Hickam as well. And then, sorry, nothing on this trip for Jeff or Henry. Jeff, I've seen some of your book collection behind you on YouTube, and you look like you're all set. Henry, you have your dad's Bible and writings, and that just about beats all. So yeah, I think we agree with her there.
So she's saying I'm the charity case is what she's basically getting at, which is fine. I'll take charity. That's all right.
Let's see. So I'm going to finish up here with a note for Henry. This past spring, we visited the World War II Museum in New Orleans. Being in that part of the country for the first time, we side-tripped to Mobile to tour the USS Alabama and USS Drum. My son asked if we wouldn't mind stopping at your dad's gravesite to pay his respects. Now, I know enough folks have mentioned the profound effect your dad's writing has had on them, so I won't belabor that point. Suffice it to say, with the old breed has made a huge impact on us. I'm grateful to your father's writing and for your continued efforts to keep his legacy alive. Hear, hear. Note for Jeff. My son wants to be either a museum curator or a high school history teacher. You are proof that one can do both. This spring or summer, we're hoping to go to Texas to finally visit the National Museum of the Pacific War, and we'll visit the Highland Lake Squadron, hopefully when you have an event happening. Your reading recommendations are always appreciated, and of course, thank you for your service to our country. I've attached some pictures to this email from the past 2 Pearl Harbor anniversary events. Sincerely, Rona Bushbaum, San Jose, California. P.S. I love the "What You Reading" segment and routinely add to my collection based on your recommendations. I'm currently reading The Battle of Okinawa, The Blood, and the Bomb by George Pfeiffer. Rona, we thank you
That's a
so
beautiful
much.
email.
And it is really beautiful. And I told these 2 guys when I read it that I'm going to reread this email multiple times because I know there's going to be days where, you know, we all have busy lives. We have all these things going on, and we're, you know, juggling the kids and cooking with your foot and driving with your knee and everything that we feel like we're juggling in our
Don't eat at
lives. And
Jeff's
then we
house.
sit down and do a podcast. We're like, man, I hope somebody's listening to us. And somebody is. And Rona, we're proud to be part of your World War II community.
And if you guys want to help support the show, 1, send an email. 2, share us with your friends. Share us on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Send an email. Just verbally say, hey, check out this podcast if you know a like-minded person. And as always, you can head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com. Click on that Patreon link. Sign up and subscribe. We got 3 plans. One's $1 a month. One's $3.50. One's $7.50. You get some free stickers and this and that. We do have the new logo, which if you guys are watching visually on the stream, you can see it down in the bottom left. It would be the right side of your screen. It's my left. But yeah, and we're working on getting that on T-shirts. So I have the old school original T-shirt. We're going to have the new one. And for those of you who are a member of Patreon, I am printing up. I'm not lying. Before the show, I am printing up new versions. So I printed up old versions of the sticker. I was going to mail it to you guys. I do have to redo these because I need to change the punchline, your favorite World War II based podcast, because in that stencil font, the letters lift. So I need to change the font on that. So those are going. I'm going to send you guys those too. So you're going to get more than one sticker. But yeah, we're going to make some smaller ones too. So the new logo is going to be out in sticker format. Even if you're not a Patreon member, just email us, mail call WTSP World War II, say you want a sticker, and we'll send them out to you. And we'll put up links to the new shirts. All the old shirts are still available. Just click on the merch link on our website. And that covers all the plugs. So, Henry, what do you got going on, friend?
I'm still reading Big Week by James Holland.
Well, if we're doing that segment, let me make the listeners happy.
Oh,
what you reading?
Yeah, well, okay. Didn't mean to jump off.
No worries.
That. No, man, it's just enjoying another show with you guys.
So you're reading that one. So I'm finishing up Wing and a Prayer, and then I'm going to mail that to you because I think you're going to love that book.
Look forward to reading it.
Jeff, what you reading?
Well, I was hesitant. I was trying to think about how do I want to introduce what I'm reading right now, and I've been reading it for quite some time, and I have it behind me here. It's just called Patriots, by A.J. Languth, The Men Who Started the American Revolution, a breathtaking portrait of boldness, courage, and sheer youthful vitality, according to Newsweek. So here's the cover, and our listeners are like, dude, that has nothing to do with World War II. How does this help me? And I got to be honest. So I'm studying history. It's my major. That's my degree plan. That's what I spend so much time on throughout the week, all my history homework. And I think I've mentioned this before, right? So really to really understand the air war and the bomber mafia, you really truly did need to dig deep into the interwar years and the First World War to really understand the aviation aspect of what became World War II and the decisions that were made based on the information at hand. But I think that really kind of goes for anything. And to really immerse yourself, because we are coming up on living history season, right? I've got an air show coming up in March. I've got a tactical I was invited to in May. I got another air show I was invited to perform at in May as well. All those things, to really immerse yourselves. There were not guys serving in World War II that were probably reading the books that we do, unless, well, they weren't. Plain and simple. So I started thinking, okay, my war, the Iraq Afghanistan era, had a lot of guys that were Vietnam buffs, and I'm sure there were guys in Vietnam that were probably Civil War buffs. So why would there not be World War II guys that were Revolutionary War buffs? And we're talking about Ticonderoga and Benedict Arnold and Thomas Jefferson and Hancock and Washington when they were sitting there waiting to storm the beach somewhere. So that thought really occurred to me. I said, you know what? Okay, I can excuse myself because I feel like a traitor not reading about World War II, but I'm still immersed in the World War II experience by learning what our forefathers did, to create the country that we have, to create the military we had, to the standards, to what we did in World War II.
And to put a finer point on it, I think Henry's father pointed out in his book that after his first taste of combat, hey, this isn't exactly like what we were reading about the Civil War books and the Revolutionary War stuff. And so, yeah, to put a finer point on it, that's a lot of those men, and they were kids when they enlisted and became men. That a lot of them were history buffs. And I think Henry could probably speak to that a little bit too. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and going back, like you say, Jeff, I mean, that it helps you encapsulate all the knowledge. It increases your perspective and broadens your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can be armchair generals all day long, and we enjoy doing it. And we have the luxury of doing it. But yeah, as history buffs, I don't think there's any particular era that we wouldn't enjoy. And so I challenge and I encourage our listeners to maybe think outside the box a little bit sometimes, and pick up a book about the Somme or Gettysburg, or the Battle of Trenton, and you'll see the similarities. And I've said this so many times that war is war. The names change, the faces change, but every platoon of men, back to the Greek phalanx, you had the same type of individuals that were fighting next to you, and there's a commonality there that it doesn't matter what weapon they're wielding or what battlefront they're on. There is a sense of there's a link there through time that is the phenomenon that we refer to simply as combat. And to appreciate and to understand all of it, I think makes you not only a better historian and better, a well-versed person, but a little bit more empathetic to those that smelled and tasted what they did on any battlefield.
And furthermore, as you read some of the books, a lot of times it's brought up about Hitler and even some of the Japanese commanders. A lot of them make references to the past wars that they studied to get their combat, idealisms. And plus, over in Europe, a lot of those battlegrounds were battlegrounds many, many times. They weren't just battlegrounds during World War II. They were battlegrounds during World War I and plenty of other, land wars over there. And so it'll kind of help tie a lot of that together when you're reading and you're hearing references made to generals from the past. It'll help tie all that stuff together for you.
Absolutely.
I wish I had it here. I left it at work because I've been drinking out of it. Little segment of what you collecting. It was so funny because poor Josh at work, he sees me come back from the post office box during my lunch. Now he's got a little new thing, and I pull out this little white mug and I plop it down on my desk, and he's like, "What's that?" I was like, "What do you think it is?" "Looks like a mug." "Yeah? What's wrong with it? Where's the handle?" I said, "This is what they call it, a watchman milk cup or a watchman mug. That way when you're up on the naval ship or and you're on watch and it's cold, you can heat your hands up with it." And I was at an event not too long ago, and Jeremy and JR from Georgia, they were down there, and it was cold weekend, and they had 2 or 3 of them, and I was drinking out one, and they told me, "Hey, if you see these things, scoop them up because they're getting harder and harder to find." And I sent a picture to Jeff a few days later because I was working late. That's why we moved this episode to today because I didn't get off work till like 9 o'clock on Monday. And I sent you guys a picture of me holding it in front of my monitors, and Jeff's like, "Hey, I've been looking for one of those." I looked at Josh and said, "See, told you." I'm not the only one crazy buying 80-year-old Corningware, which is made by Corning Company. So they are all over eBay. I did steal that one. One of the things I love to do on eBay is catch someone slipping. I like to catch the auctions that everybody else is sleeping on, and so you get the nice price instead of the marked up bid price. And I got that one for the opening bid price, so I was happy on that. And I am drinking my coffee out of it. I ain't scared. So
well done, man. Yeah, and I think there's a famous photo. Maybe you can put it on our website. But Don's already shaking his head, right? The Marine on the Arthur Middleton, I think, was the name. Is APA 25, I want to say, and he's standing there, and his dungarees are all jacked up, and it looks like he just rolled around in a bunch of volcanic ash, and
he has one in his hand.
He's got a guy just cradling his hand, and it's just like you can tell this cup of coffee is like the best thing that this guy's experienced in the last week or possibly month,
Mm-hmm. And the guys behind him sitting at the table all have them in their hands too, and that's such a great. And I showed him that photo too. Like, look familiar, and that's such a. And his wrists are at this weird angle almost. It almost looks like his arms are fake. You can't see his wrist. He's got a weird. He's just covered in grease and soot and slime. Like you can't. He almost looks like he just got done. Packing wheel bearings in an old Ford. His hands are just completely just black and slimy. He's got this bright white handleless mug in his hand, which in a black and white photo just sticks out so well, and it's such a great famous photo because as Jeff said, all he cared about was that cup of Joe.
Yeah.
And it kind of maybe they gave a little homage to it in the Pacific. Remember, they're all sitting around. "Oh, who's ever heard of Guadalcanal?" And like, are you kidding me? The Navy guys.
You guys are heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he takes that coffee, I was thinking that exact thought when you said that.
Yeah,
Jeff. I mean, I know his was a mug, but that just the way he's cradling it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what else is going on in your world, Henry? We kind of stepped on you when you brought up the book, but I wanted to get that part of the show out of the way.
No, not at all, man. Just really busy at work, but just plugging away, working on my own thing there, book project. I got a lot done on that over the weekend. With my son's activities, it seems like I only have 1 or 2 days a week I can really do anything with it. I think Leighton wants to have Saul, David, and me on the We Happy Few podcast.
Nice.
They had been talking about having us back, so I think next week we're going to do that. So I guess talk about devil dogs, but that's really about it right now.
Now, obviously, we don't want to shine any light of any shape or form on your project, but you have hinted you are writing some stuff. Have you found that the more time you spend getting the words on paper, the easier the process is coming to you because of the practice?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it kind of has its own critical mass just because the unpublished material is the heart of it, and so I add my own voice to just fill in the gaps between the unpublished portions, because I'm trying to keep it focused on that. I don't want to redo with the old breed.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's a slow process, but when I sit down and can put time to it, it's going okay.
And plus, it's your real first time going down this trail. And just like anything else you do for the first time, whether you're doing comedy or writing songs or writing books, you have to quote unquote find your voice, what works for you, and how
Right.
And as you put more time in it, it just comes quicker and smoother, and probably become a little easier for you.
Yeah,
and I'm
absolutely
excited to see the end product on that. So what else?
Yeah, I wish I was closer to it, but we'll get there.
Like Johnny Cash, man, one piece at a time. You'll have that.
So I think what Henry's really hinting to is what he really wants to do is take like 4 or 5 days vacation here in Texas, around that spring break area. Come to my air show, see what it's about, get some time off out here in God's country, and really kind of step away and get some work done on this book. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Let me put a little warning out there because I experienced it firsthand out there in God's country. They got big ass brown tarantulas. I found one of the place I was staying, a beautiful place. We just got back from the USO show, and I'm walking through, and I've been late night, and I'm walking through, and I see this big ass hairy thing on the floor. Like, get on my phone, Texas Oh wow, they got tarantulas here in Texas. So I went to the kitchen, got a cup, put it on top. Said, I'll deal with this in the morning. I don't want it in my bed. I went to bed the next morning. She was still there. Got a piece of paper, slid it under, took her outside, and let her go. But yeah, I just put a cup on her, went to bed. I'll do that tomorrow.
I think I've seen 3 the whole time I've lived here.
No. I was there for 3 days, and there she was.
Yeah. And everything is bigger in Texas, so it may not have even been a tarantula. It could have just been a wolf spider. Like,
wolf spider.
Oh, I got wolf spiders and brown recluses down here. I know what those look like. Now this bad boy was a brown Texas tarantula because I googled it.
Yeah.
Like, I know I've been drinking, but tarantulas here. Yep. Put the mug on and went to bed.
That's okay. Henry's not scared, and Don, obviously, this invite goes to you too. I know you've kind of already made the trip here, but Frontier Airlines pretty cheap. I'll pick you up in Dallas. Come down, spend a weekend.
Yes, when I made the trip back to Ohio for the funeral, they just announced, hey, starting next week, we're flying to Dallas. So sweet. And yeah, as you just alluded to, little pro tip for those of you flying Frontier: put on all your clothes and leave everything else at home, because then you won't have to pay the $70 for your baggage fee. But other than that, it's a good flight. They nickel and dime you. I hadn't flown in a long time. When I lived out in California, I flew a lot to get back to my family. But since here in Florida, it's just a 17-hour drive. And so I haven't flown in years. And so I go check in, and like, you're good to go. I'm like, where's my boarding pass? And they looked at me and said, you got a smartphone? I was like, yeah. Like, download the app, otherwise we got to charge you $38 to print a boarding pass. I'm like, Google Play Store, Frontier app download. Jeez. They gave me my confirmation code. I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, they wanted $38. And then show a little age. Henry, you remember these days. Once again, I hadn't flown probably 10, 12 years. Back when I had flown, it was before inflation and airlines got cheaper plus money hungry. Back in the day, like, I don't know, 2010, when they saw your 6'5" ass come, they said, hey, you're tall. Would you like the bulkhead seat, a little extra leg room? You're like, yes. Like, come this way. Now it's, hey, you're tall. Would you like the bulkhead seat? You're like, yeah. Like, okay, that's an upgrade fee. Cough it up, sucker. Like, no.
Oh, man.
But I will say, after we got up in the air, because the flight was not even close to being full, because I asked before we got to Tarawa, I said, hey, after we get up in the air, can I move over there? And like, got to charge you. Like, that sucks. But after we got up in the air, he came and tapped on my shoulder and said, go ahead and move. So they did do they did do me a solid and put me in
that's cool.
right in front of the ejections, the door, so I was able to spread my tall, lanky ass legs out a little bit. But yeah, so short man's world, I'm just living in it. But you guys have anything else you want to cover before we wrap up this episode?
I don't think so. I'm glad I could be with you guys. I feel like a guest at the. I don't feel like a host anymore. It's been so long.
You're a busy man.
But it'll start slowing it down, guys.
I will say your internet has been superb tonight, with the exception of like 38 seconds during the email you're reading. You haven't max headroomed all night, so your internet was coming through strong tonight. No audible issues at all. So that's a plus.
All right, those tarantulas must have moved out of the way of the signal. Is what happened.
And for those of you guys who watch the video podcast, you'll notice that my screen didn't go green tonight. You didn't have to look at a thumbnail. Poor Henry had to spend 120 minutes looking at a thumbnail 2 weeks ago because I had to cut my video because I was more worried about the audio. We got a new computer here in the Digital 410 studio, a lot more resources. And as you can see, the video and the audio is superb. And we want to thank everybody for your continued support. If you listen to the What's in Your Head podcast the other day, I mentioned that was my 410th episode of Doing Any Podcast. Tonight it was my 412th. So maybe by 415, I'll get halfway decent at this sort of thing, and maybe you all want to listen more. But I want to thank each and every one of you for your continued support. Thanks to Henry and Jeff for making this podcast what it is. And thanks to the audience for reaching out and sending us the emails. We love that.
Thank you, Rona.
And Instagram. Our Instagram numbers have grown. We're damn near to 500, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we've only had an Instagram page for, 6 months or so? So our Instagram page hasn't been around very long. So, yeah, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and, of course, WTSPWorldWar2.com, which you can find a link on YouTube and watch us live every Monday. We're just Wednesday in it tonight because, work and such. So thank you guys very much, and maybe, who knows, maybe next week we'll actually have a theme song again that won't get us smacked on the wrist by the fine people over at YouTube, but that's the remains to be seen. So for myself, Jeff, and Henry, thank you guys, and we will talk to you all next week.
This has been a Digital 410 production.